Welcome to Wheelbearings, episode 113. Just two of us this time around. It's Rebecca and myself. I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad from Navigant Research.
And I'm Rebecca Linland from Rebecca Drives.
Good morning, Rebecca. We're doing a rare morning recording today.
Clutching coffee.
Yeah, because Dan's been doing some traveling. He had some family commitment over the weekend and had to travel down south. So why don't we dive right into this? What have you been driving most recently?
So most recently, I was invited to go to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I don't know if I said that correctly.
I think that's the right pronunciation.
To drive the 2020 Hyundai Palisade, their 7-seat SUV. And the great thing is that I also just recently drove the Kia Telluride, so I was able to really kind of compare and contrast those two.
So what is, I mean, aside from the obvious design differences, did you find any particular differences between the two?
There's probably some minutia differences. I think to the general consumer, they won't necessarily see significant differences. They're both they both are really handsome vehicles. I think that they are both priced really well. I think they're both a good example of luxury at a really great price point, maybe higher than what some people are used to with Hyundai or Kia, but still really good. So I'll dive in a little bit on the Palisade. It has a 3.5 liter engine in it. It has multiple drive modes, which we actually were able to drive off-road in. We did about 25 miles of off-road driving in this vehicle. And while it doesn't have
That's a lot more than you usually get on one of these drive programs.
It's a lot more. I mean, they were really, and it wasn't rock climbing or anything like that. It was basically a dirt road that you would take out to your campsite or out to, basically a gravel driveway that you may see on ranches in Montana kind of thing, or in Idaho. But it was definitely an opportunity to test out some of the torque vectoring that the vehicle has. And one of the things that I really liked about it was that it has the ability, because of the paddle shifters, you can actually downshift in places that you may want to slow down and not put your brakes on. So things like snow and off-roading. I'm not going to lie, I'm not great at this. I was driving with Sue Mead, who is a Automotive Hall of Fame a member. She has won 3 Dakar rallies. She's really good at that. It's not to say that the average driver is going to downshift significantly, but it was cool to be able to use the paddle shifters in an environment that is relatable to me. I would if I'm driving in snow, a lot of times I hate the fact that, all cars are automatics now, it seems, and you can't downshift. And so it was a little tricky. It's an 8-speed manual, 8-speed automatic. And so it was a little bit tricky for me to figure out exactly how to downshift and where to downshift and when. But I just liked the fact that it was available to me. The vehicle comes in 3 different trim lines. The very base model is still pretty well equipped. It's the SC. It starts at $31,550 for the front wheel drive, and then all wheel drive adds a little bit of it goes up to $33,250. So, I would always encourage people, if their budget allows, to bump up to the middle trim line. That has been my philosophy really from my very first car purchase, the SEL. And that again has some really nice features to it. There's a couple of packages that I would encourage people to look at. They add about $4,600 to that price tag. So you start to get up there. You start to tip into the nearly $40,000 range, but it adds, a lot of nice features. It adds LED tail lamps. It adds a larger cluster display. It adds the wireless charging, which is always really convenient. 3rd row USB outlets, things that, families really like. And then the premium premium pack for $2,400. That's going to add an 8-way passenger seat. It's going to add the third row seating, the power folding and unfolding and reclining. And that power is something that's not available in the Kia Telluride. So if you are planning on using that third row quite a bit, this power feature is something that you can only get in the Palisade. A funny story, we were actually driving with Brian Scott, who is the COO of Hyundai North America, and Rick Case, who has a string of dealerships across the nation, particularly in the mid and southeast. And he's just lovely, has over 20 dealerships, truly a self-made man. Kind of, he had one of the first Hyundai dealerships in the country. And
so he's a real risk taker then.
So, well, he is a risk taker, actually, and he's also owner of Honda Jet number 2, and but the great thing about that is that we didn't get to meet his wife because she was piloting the Honda Jet. So I think they're both a really fascinating couple. But he and Brian are both well over 6 feet. I would say they're like 6'2", and they both folded themselves into the third row of the Palisade, and they said they're like, we're really comfortable back here. They had no complaints, which was really fun to see. And little tiny Sue Mead and me are driving the front seat.
Yeah, I know Sue. She's not much taller than you are.
No, I think she's 5'1.5" and I'm 5 feet. So we really, it was great, but it was really nice to see a fully, truly usable third row seat. And that's something that the vehicle itself, though, doesn't compromise on that. I mean, when you're driving it, as you said, Sue and I are both really small. But one of the things that I noticed about both of these vehicles, both the Telluride and the Palisade, is that they drive so well, really small for their size. You don't get that feeling of dragging this huge vehicle around. And some people will say, after a year or so, you do start to get used to it, and you start to feel that. And I certainly had that experience when I had a BMW X5. After about a year, I'm like, what are you doing in this vehicle? But for a family-sized vehicle, I think that the Palisade is just terrific. The top trim line is the limited, and that's $44,700. So it's significantly more. It's over $11,000 more than the SEL middle trim line. But you also get absolutely everything. The only option, I think, on that vehicle is floor mats. It's like some kind of special floor mat.
And, that's actually not a bad price, when you compare
it's not.
It to, like, for example, the Explorer that I just drove. You can get an Explorer Platinum or even a tricked out ST, up to 60,000 or above. I think the Platinum I think it maxes out somewhere around 62. So for the Palisade, something like the Palisade, which is really going to be a direct competitor, at least to some trim levels of the Explorer, that's a pretty reasonable price.
It is. And I may have misspoke. It's a 3.8 liter. I don't know if I said 3.5.
Yeah,
it's a 3.8 liter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 3.8. But no, you're absolutely right, Sam. And that was one of the discussions that we were having at the event, is what a good value this vehicle is. And, one of the things I want to get people away from is saying, but $44,000 for a Hyundai? Yes, $44,000 for a Hyundai, because look at what you're getting. And you're getting their 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. You're getting beautiful fit and finish. The design of it is absolutely lovely. It's a really handsome vehicle, and the interior is absolutely no compromise. And so, it's 5,000 towing capacity. I mean, there's just a lot of really great things about it, and you're getting a ton of safety features, and all of this is, in the limited edition for $44,000, you're getting all of this standard. There's none of that picking and choosing. There's none of that, I didn't know I had to check that box. You're getting absolutely everything. And so, the idea that, but I'm not going to pay that for a Hyundai, that is so 1990s, like I can't even stand it anymore.
Yeah, I think, the market has probably largely gotten past that, especially, when you compare the prices. Yeah, the prices of a Hyundai or a Kia, for that matter, have gone up significantly over the years, but so have the prices of every other brand. And
every other brand, and the quality, but the things that the quality, the functionality, the packaging has all gone up with it.
right.
So
and JD Power just announced their latest initial quality survey results last week, and Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis were the top 3 brands overall.
Yes.
I can't remember which order they were in, but I mean, it was all, the three brands of the Hyundai Motor Group were the top 3, way ahead of everything else in the U.S. market.
Yeah. And so that alone should tell people that these are not, these are not the Hyundais that you may think of your childhood. And, I had one of the first Hyundai Excels. It was white with maroon interior in college, but I loved that little thing. It got me through college. That my payment was $75 a month. Only one time did I have to ask my dad for help, and that was because I overshopped at Macy's. Otherwise, but it was a terrific car. And even that was really well equipped. And so, I think that people really need to start considering Hyundai and Kia if they haven't already, because they're definitely deserving of a look. And with that terrific warranty, you're covered for 10 years or 100,000 miles. And so, the price point I think is fantastic on it. And as you say, Sam, it's very, very competitive, if not even much better than some of their in their competitive set.
So let's go back for a moment to what you were talking about, driving off-road. Earlier this year, you and I were both on the Honda Passport drive, and I've been when I was on doing driving the Explorer recently. They had an off-road course. Compared to we drove the Passport in Utah, on a lot of off-road trails.
Right.
Compared to that, the stuff that you drove on with the Palisade. Was that as challenging as what we drove the Passport on, or less?
I would say it was less so.
Okay.
And then Honda also had us on a pilot event that was specific to show its off-road capabilities. But this was less so. This was more of a gravel. It was more like focused on traction than anything. And so, we were at speed for a good portion of it. As I said, when Sue was driving in particular, she had it going 60, 65, 70 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. I did not go that fast, but but we did similar speeds in the Passport, if you remember. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a lead, so we didn't have a guide to follow like we did in the Passport, but so we were all kind of on our own. But I do think that the torque vectoring, where each the power goes to an individual wheel, wherever you have traction. There's a locking rear differential that you can engage. I think that there's a desire to show that these vehicles are off-road capable, even if they're a crossover, a car-based vehicle. And we certainly found that. As I said, Sue was very comfortable off-road, and so she really banged it out. I felt like I was going what a lot of people would drive in that probably 45 to 50 mile an hour range. And then there were times when I felt like the back end was a little squirrely on me, but I think that was more my driving than the car itself. There's a lot, it was a lot of gravel, and there was a lot of hills to it, but it was not an off-road course. It was an off-road road.
Right.
It was a gravel road.
The reason I ask is because I'm looking through the spec sheet as you're talking, and it looks like one of the features that they don't have on the Palisade is hill descent control, which may be the reason why they were having you use the paddles to downshift when you were going down longer grades. Because what hill descent control does, I don't know how familiar you are with it. It basically manages the brakes. When you're on a steep grade, there's a pitch sensor in the vehicle, and if you're going down a steep grade and you have hill descent control activated, it will basically manage your speed as you're going down that grade.
Right, but they do have downhill brake control. Is that different?
Okay, well maybe and this is one of the problems is everybody comes up with their own branding for the same functionality.
Exactly. So that's on all-wheel drive. Yeah, that's on all-wheel drive only. So I think they do have something similar, but they did not give us an opportunity to really test that. So, and I believe that we did on the Passport.
Right. Yeah, we did on the Passport and
yes.
We did on the Explorer as well.
Yeah, so we didn't have an opportunity to test that, but they do have it available. It's all-wheel drive only.
Okay,
which I think is typical.
Yeah, and that's fine. Because really, you're less likely to be taking a front-wheel drive vehicle into that kind of terrain where you would want to take advantage of something like hill descent control.
Right. One of the things that's curious to me is this idea that these vehicles don't come, the upper trim line, so the Limited isn't available as an 8-passenger. They only have those captain's chairs. Mm-hmm. So it's standard, the 8-passenger is standard on the base SE, it's optional on the SEL, and then it's not available on the Limited. And I don't quite understand that. And as an example, I had a colleague of mine reach out to me and say, hey, I saw your Palisade review, but there's no 8-passenger on the Limited. And I love this reasoning. It goes, the dog likes to sit in the middle of the two kids.
Yeah.
And so he wants that bench seating. And I don't totally understand that logic of why they talk about, there's personal space in the room in the 7-seater, but I don't get why that's that concept of having the two separated seats in the second row in SUVs. That's generally seen as a more premium feature as opposed to a bench seat. But why not at least offer it? Why not offer it though? Make it optional.
Yeah. I think in that case, it comes down to managing how many buildable configurations you're going to have.
Sure.
And
right.
Certainly Hyundai, like a lot of other, especially the Japanese brands, Hyundai and Kia, like to limit the number of standalone options that they offer. And so they'll and American brands and others have been moving in that direction because the more buildable combinations you have, it adds complexity in the manufacturing plant, and it adds cost. So if you limit the number of configurations, then it's easier to maintain quality levels and make sure you've got all the right pieces on every vehicle coming off the line, unlike certain brands who don't really seem to care about that, but we won't get into them right now. But they are all built in California. I think they probably looked at for the Limited, what percentage of, and based on their past experience, what percentage of customers do we think are going to want to opt for a bench seat in the Limited? And if they see it's 1 or 2%, maybe a few hundred customers at most, then they'll say, okay, we're just not going to offer that combination because it's not worth it to us. The extra cost and complexity in manufacturing is not worth adding that option. We're not going to get enough incremental sales from that to justify it.
Yeah, no, I totally, I'm all for simplification of manufacturing. It's just, I guess it's just interesting to me that the premium is seen, as more as the captain's chairs and, and I kind of get it, but at the same time, like my friend right away, he's like, okay, well then I guess I'll get another Acadia. And I was like, wait a minute, the Acadia doesn't have 3 rows anymore. And so we're going back and forth on that. And, earlier we were talking about the differences and this may or may not impact people's decisions, but it is important to note that the Hyundai is actually made in South Korea and the Kia is made at West Point, Georgia. So that, could impact if you like to buy vehicles that are made in the U.S., then that could impact your decision on which vehicle you go for.
Before we started recording, you were also telling me something about a conversation you were having with Mike O'Brien from Hyundai about the relationship between Hyundai and Kia. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. So this was really interesting. So Kia is wholly owned by Hyundai and has been now for
Actually, they're
decades,
not wholly
think,
owned
right?
by Hyundai.
Oh.
I think Hyundai owns like 60% of Kia or something like that. But they're part.
Oh.
But they're considered part of Hyundai Motor Group.
They're part of Hyundai, right? They're part of Hyundai Motor Group. I mean, when you go to South Korea, everything is integrated there, and some of the same people that the designers in particular work on both products work actually on Genesis as well, and so they work on all three brands, and there's you don't have this sense of separation like you do in the States, and so it turns out that and again, this was something that Sue and I didn't fully realize, was that because of their corporate structure in the States, they're actually two completely separate companies, and therefore they are also seen as competitors, and they're not allowed to talk to each other. They can't do any kind of collaboration. They can't compare their vehicles, in the design phase. I mean, it's this whole, it's as if they were BMW and Mercedes, and there's absolutely no relationship whatsoever to them, or Ford and GM. And that was something that we didn't fully realize, that, because obviously there's a lot of discussion about what are the differences between these two vehicles, how did development happen and such. And so a lot of that discussion goes on in Korea. But then as soon as it comes to the States, these are two completely separate entities, and they treat each other like two completely separate entities, like competitors. And it's funny because years ago, when I used to go and I would go and provide insights and marketing conditions and such to each of these companies out in California, and I would say, if I was meeting with Hyundai, I'm going to see Kia, and they wouldn't say anything, and then Kia wouldn't say anything about Hyundai. Not that I'm looking for inside information or anything, but it was just funny. It was like, to me, it was kind of like saying to a brother, I'm going to go see your sister. And that was not the case actually at all, that these are two completely separate companies, and they have to abide by all the same rules in terms of corporate governance and secrecy and privacy and such. And so if they have friends that work, if Hyundai people have friends that work at Kia or vice versa, they are allowed to socialize, but they're not allowed to talk about work. And so I just thought that was really interesting, that how completely separate, and how they are really actually seen as direct competitors and have to abide by all the rules and governances that involve direct competitors.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because the companies that we typically think of as Hyundai and Kia here in the U.S. are marketing companies. They are not actually the manufacturers. The way they're set up, and the same thing actually applies to Honda and Toyota as well. I think it's less so in the case of Nissan, but they have a bunch of different units that are technically separate companies that are related. So Hyundai Motor America and Kia Motors of America are the marketing arms, and then there are a couple of separate companies which do manufacturing. There's Hyundai Motor Manufacturing, which is in Alabama or Georgia. I forget. Alabama. And then Kia.
Yeah, because Kia's in Georgia.
They have their plant there. And then there's another company, which is Hyundai America Technical Center Incorporated, which is here just a few minutes from where I'm sitting here in Michigan. And that's the R&D and engineering arm. And they actually do work for all three brands here. So they do development work and do things like do all the certification testing, handle emissions certification, safety certification. They do a lot of technology development, and they also work with the teams back in Korea. So they're actually connected to all three, Genesis, Hyundai, and Kia. The marketing arms here in the U.S. So it's this weird kind of relationship. And as I said, Toyota's got similar kind of setup. The Toyota, there's Toyota Manufacturing, there's Toyota Motor Sales, which is in Texas. That's the marketing arm, and they do the product planning. They figure out what products they're going to sell here, and all the retail side of it, and warranty, and all those things. But then there's the the manufacturing business, which is based in Kentucky, and then the R&D, the technical center here in Ann Arbor, which also are technically separate companies. And then there's the Toyota Research Institute, which is yet another company which is developing their autonomous driving technologies.
Weren't we just talking about simplification a second ago?
Yeah, well, that only applies to the manufacturing. What build combinations you have, not necessarily to your corporate structure.
But no, it's true. It's much more complicated because I think Honda R&D is kind of similar. Like they're in a separate building and they're kind of operate on their own as well. But so I just thought that was a very interesting, so if you're planning on leveraging, your discussion with as you go to buy these vehicles with your Hyundai versus Kia dealer, you're not going to get anywhere because they're two completely separate things. Yeah. And it's just a true competitor for them. But I will say, again, both these products are really, really good. Both of them, I think, are highly, highly competitive amongst their competitive set. It's really more of a preference, a styling preference. I think that the Kia Telluride is a little bit, probably a little bit more muscular and almost like in your face kind of feel to it, whereas the Palisade is maybe a little bit more elegant. But both of them, definitely test drive both of them, because I think that it's strictly a preference thing. There wasn't a significant material difference in my experience. I probably, I drove the Telluride because I had the Telluride for a week here at home, and I drove it down to Jersey, as I said a couple of podcasts ago, and over Memorial Day weekend, and I just really grew to love the thing. The Palisade, I'll look forward to having it at home at some point. This was just a one-day event with it, but both of them are fantastic. Both of them are fantastic. So, what were you driving this week?
Let's see. Since the last time we recorded, I had the Mazda 3, the 2019 Mazda 3 hatch, all-wheel drive with the premium package, which I really like that car. I like the way it looks. I love the way it drives. This year, the new 3 is the first production iteration of Mazda's, their evolution of their design direction, their Kodo design language.
Yes.
And in the review I wrote, I kind of described it as, if you think of it, over the last couple of generations of Mazda design, starting about a decade ago to where we are today, they've you can think of it, 2 generations ago as kind of being, the rock that falls off of the side of a gorge or a cliff into a river. And then over time, as it tumbles around in the river and the water flows over it, it gets smoothed out. And what we have today is that smoothed out rock, pebble in the river. That's kind of the way the design has evolved. So you've gone away from sharply creased metal, to more organic form to it. There's still a lot of contour to it. And particularly in certain colors, less so in the gray color that I had, but especially in the red that they offer on there, and some other colors. And obviously depending on the light, it looks very different. But you've got this very organic form to it that looks very cohesive, all of one piece, and it's I think it really looks fantastic. And we've seen this concept evolve. This design idea evolve on various concepts over the last couple of years, and this is the first production model, and we'll be seeing it rolling out to the rest of the lineup over the next 2 or 3 years, as those models get updated. This year, they have simplified the powertrain lineup. They dropped the 2-liter engine that was available previously. They have just the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder Skyactiv G gas engine. They will be bringing a plug-in hybrid version, or maybe it's just a regular hybrid. I can't remember now. In a year or so, eventually we may also get the Skyactiv X engine, which is their compression ignition gas engine, which is sort of a hybrid between a gas and a diesel engine, and we've talked about in the past. But this is also the first time that they've offered all-wheel drive on the Mazda 3.
In that hatchback. That's awesome.
In the hatchback and in the sedan. It's available in both.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and while the 2.5 as it is right now is quite nice, 184 horsepower, 184 foot-pounds of torque. It's more than adequate for everybody's daily driving, and you can get it with a manual transmission in the base trim level, 6-speed automatics only, in the upper trim levels, as is unfortunately all too typical these days. With the all-wheel drive, it would be really nice if they offered, say, the 2.5 liter turbo that you can get in the CX-5 or the
hint.
And I wouldn't be surprised if something like that eventually appeared. But even as it is now, it's a really nice combination. The work they've done on the ride and handling. It does a great job of body control, but it also, absorbs, typical Michigan roads without any problem at all. The steering feels great as it always does on Mazdas. The only, when we talked last week about, the lack of a touchscreen in there, and Mazda's decision, to issue touchscreens in their cars and go with the central controller. And I think the system in this car works really, really well, regardless of whether you're using the stock Mazda interface or Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. You can navigate around very quickly with the knob, either twisting it or giving it a push, in any of 4 directions, and then push down to select. I think it, and it's right there, right by your hand. When you drop your hand off the steering wheel, it's right behind the shifter. Very easy to access, and you can get around the interface very quickly with it. And like most of these controller setups, it's got 4 push buttons around it, for shortcuts. Just like on a BMW. So you have, your home, navigation, media, and back buttons around there. And
right.
In most cases, on a BMW, for example, even if you're using CarPlay, if you press one of those, it will take you to the corresponding page, like the navigation, it'll take you to the BMW navigation page in the system.
Right.
However, on the Mazda, I like this. They when you use one of the smartphone projection systems, it remaps those so that if I'm using Android Auto and I hit the nav button, it takes me to Google Maps. Or if I hit the media button, it takes me to the media player page in the Android Auto interface. And it's only
that's nice.
It's only if I disconnect the phone and I'm using the standard interface, then it'll take me to the corresponding Mazda pages. So I think that's a really nice touch.
Right.
And I think, overall the interior, I think, is really beautifully executed. I mean, Mazda has been doing a great job on their interiors for a long time. And, they've widely been considered to have the best interiors, over the past decade for mainstream models. And this one, takes it even further. It's a very clean dashboard design. A lot of people like to talk about how clean and uncluttered, the Tesla Model 3 is, but it's got that giant touchscreen in the middle of it, but no other buttons. This one has, very minimal buttons. You've got the screen up on top of the dash, that is away. It's not a touch screen, so it's not within your reach, but it's close to your closer to your line of sight when you're driving. And then below that, in the front of the dash, there's a smaller display for the climate control and just a small cluster of buttons there to manage your climate control, and that's it. And then you have some vents on either side of the instrument cluster and a couple on the passenger side, in that center row of the dash. And it's a very clean design. It's not cluttered with a lot of excess stuff, and I think it works really well. The one
I'm looking at the steering wheel. The steering wheel looks like it has a lot of buttons on it, though.
There's 4 rockers on there.
Okay, I see those. But then are there 3 buttons below each of those?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, maybe that's just a design. Well, it looks like there's icons on some of them, but I agree with you. I mean, the interior itself, it's not only is it beautiful, I love the shape and form. It does look like it looks very, very clean. I just feel like the steering wheel seems to be a little busy, but at the same time, if it's intuitive, then I think that's great, because then you get to keep your hands on the wheel, as long, just taking that time to learn all of those different tricks and where everything is. But I agree, it looks really, really nice and clean. It's a beautiful interior.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the steering wheel right now. So you have 4 rockers. For volume, forward and back. To
and then
flip
for the
through
cruise settings.
Yeah, cruise and flipping through the pages in the instrument cluster, and then below that, there's a button to answer the phone, a button for voice control.
Okay, so they're all very intuitive.
Yeah,
then.
You learn it very quickly. So
right.
It's not, and compared to some steering wheels, it's not bad at all. And it's all concentrated on those 2 spokes. Very easy to use. So, the only kind of complaint I have is because of the design. It does have a high belt line. The glass area, especially the side glass, has been kind of minimized, and the C-pillars are on the thick side. Visibility to the back is actually surprisingly good. You're more constrained by the seats and the roof line than the actual sheet metal of the car. But certainly you do feel like you're sitting kind of low down, and this is a problem that's typical to a lot of modern vehicles, having that high belt line. And it's more of an issue, I think, in the back seats. The back seats
right.
are roomy, but you do feel kind of closed in because the glass area is smaller than before.
The glass area is dramatically smaller. I mean, it's a beautiful vehicle. The proportions of it for a front wheel drive vehicle, the proportions are really nice on it. It has such a long, nice hood, and the wheels look like they're pretty stretched to the corners, and there's a lot. It's really beautiful. But you're right. There's not a lot of glass in there at all. But it's interesting because the visibility. One of the things that I wish both the Hyundai and the Kia had was that the mirror that turns into a camera that like on a lot of other products now, because that just greatly improves your visibility than if you've got a low slung look like the Mazda 3 does. But it's a really, really nice vehicle, though. I mean, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, and we talked before, especially when each of us drove the CX-5. We were talking about the value proposition, and in retrospect now, some of the other stuff I've driven, I think we talked about the price of the CX-5 seeming kind of high. This one, the Mazda 3 starts, at just under 22,000 delivered for, base front wheel drive manual transmission model. And the one I drove with the all wheel drive and the premium package came in at just over 31 delivered, which, for a compact car, may seem a little high, but it's actually a pretty good value. And, again, if you think of it in terms of, Mazda is trying to move into a more premium segment, they're still offering a very, very competitively priced vehicle, in the entry and the mid trim levels. And then, if you compare it to, what would be the premium competitors like an Audi A3 or Mercedes A-Class, at $31,000 for a loaded model, that's less than the starting point for those German vehicles. And I think it's, as certainly in terms of its design and execution and everything and its driving dynamics, I think it's as good or better than any of those that I've driven. So, I think that, they may have really hit the sweet spot with this one. And I think, if we see more like this going forward, I think Mazda is going to be in a good place.
No, I hope so too. I'll be interested. My former colleague, Eric Ibarra at Kelley Blue Book, he's responsible for residual values. And so it'd be interesting to see if they've increased the residual values of some of these Mazdas to reflect that, because obviously a Mercedes or an Audi is going to retain their value better, because luxury cars tend to retain their value pretty well. So it'd be interesting to see from an ownership standpoint if that price point holds up. And one thing I do have to point out, because I am a fan of manual, is if you only need a front wheel drive and you don't need the all wheel drive, you can get the manual in the premium package.
Oh, okay. I missed that.
Yes. So again, just kind of playing around. I'm like, what can I get? And so it's in the all wheel drive that the manual isn't available across the board. Actually, I don't think it's available in anything in all wheel drive, which again is disappointing, because as we talked about earlier, the great thing about having a manual in snow and mud and such is that you can downshift and not have to touch your brakes and, keep your traction. But anyway, so it's another discussion. But no, I think I'm glad to see that Mazda, I think that they're definitely trying to justify their increased prices by giving you a more luxurious experience inside and out. And this design language, I did read some things online that some people weren't a fan of, but that's always going to be the case. You're always going to alienate some people and you're going to draw others in. So I think it's a beautiful design package, though.
Yeah, totally. So let's move on. After I sent back the Mazda, I briefly had the new Toyota RAV4.
Cool.
And it went back prematurely because I was having a little technical issue with it when I connected my phone, which is a Google Pixel 3 XL, to Bluetooth, which I had to do because Toyota does not yet support Android Auto, and I think the Avalon is the only one that has it yet. Nothing else that Toyota builds has it yet, but the new Highlander should this fall. But the RAV4 does not have support for Android Auto, and so I had to just use standard Bluetooth to listen to my podcasts. And when I connected it, after about 30 seconds, the screen went blank. Audio stopped. It waited about 10 seconds or so, 5 or 10 seconds, and then it all restarted again. And, reconnected the phone and started playing. And then 30, 35 seconds later, it did the same thing again. And then repeated that process over and over again. And it never went back to functioning normally until I disconnected the phone from Bluetooth. And I tried it with a different phone and it worked okay. But, I've never had this problem. I've used this phone with a lot of different cars and never had this issue before. Yeah. And I let Toyota know about it. And, so they came and got the car and they're getting it checked out, trying to understand what's going on. But the RAV4, I was just mentioning, we were talking about the price of the CX-5. This RAV4 was the RAV4 Adventure, which is sort of the off-road package, for the RAV4. This one was just shy of $40,000, and to be honest, I would much sooner pay $40,000 for the CX-5 than I would for this one. But, and in part that's, personal taste. I like the way the CX-5 looks and drives better than this. Although driving the RAV4, this new RAV4, the chassis, the suspension control was vastly superior to prior generations of this vehicle. It's, again, like most other new Toyotas, it's built on a variation of the TNGA platform, which, has a great combination of ride quality and handling, driving down bumpy roads. The body stayed nice and steady. It did a good job of soaking up, but it never felt floaty or anything. Wasn't bouncing around. I'm not particularly crazy about the design. My wife actually hated the design, and particularly hated the color of this one, which was this sort of very pale gray green color. I was fine with the color. The design is fine. Design is always a matter of personal taste.
Right.
It wasn't to my personal taste. It's a little chunkier and blockier than previous generations of the RAV4. So if you're looking for something like that, it works in that respect. The seats are comfortable, but I'll be getting back into a RAV4 again sometime later this summer. Hopefully by which time they will have sorted out whatever the issue was. But just wanted to, kind of dive into that a little bit. Some of the issues around technology, and you also had some technology issues with a Toyota vehicle this week as well.
I have the Lexus RC350 F Sport. They've actually they gave me the wrong information on it, so I don't know exactly which trim I have quite yet. I've only just received it, but I had a terrible time trying to connect my phone. I have an Android device, as you say, it doesn't support it, and I got in the car fully expecting to just be able to pair my phone, and I could not find where to pair my phone because, as my nephew discovered for me, pro tip, it's not under phone, it's under Bluetooth. It's under Bluetooth. And I get that. And he's like, well, that makes sense. I'm like, not if you offer a phone as one of the menu options. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and the same is true with the RAV4. It's a similar setup there.
Granted, I was jet lagged. It was after a long day. There's a lot of other things going on. And so when I sat in the car, I think it was only about 8:00 at night, but I'd already been up for 14 hours. And I'm just staring at it thinking the only option it gave me under phone was iPhone. And I took pictures. I sent pictures to you to be like, what am I missing here? And so then the next day Jake went out and connected it for me. And he said, well, it was under Bluetooth. And I'm looking at him like, of course it was. But one of the things that really just struck me through all of this was this idea that, they're putting out technology that only applies to a portion of the market. And by some estimates, the US market is 48% Android, 52% Apple, or about there, and then the Googles and that are, kind of the rounding number there. But globally, Android is much more popular than Apple. But regardless of that, you're in the States, here I am with an Android device, and basically Lexus and Toyota is saying, oh, sorry, we'll get to you when we get some time. And it's frustrating because there's so much competition for buyers as the market starts to slow down, and we're putting out products that really only satisfy a small portion of the market, or half of the market, I should say. So I just found it to be really frustrating. And then it sounds like with your phone, with the Pixel phone, it's one of those things where you look at and think, we're alienating half of the market from the very beginning. And I think that that's something that as an industry, we need to take this technology seriously. We need to understand that this is something that changes people's minds about whether they're going to purchase your vehicle or not. And that's pretty significant to me.
Yeah. And, in Toyota's defense, I think when you saw iPhone there, what that actually was someone who had that vehicle previously, because, we swap these vehicles around among journalists.
Right.
Somebody had connected an iPhone via Bluetooth. And so that was
right.
somebody else's settings. And this is actually, something that people should consider, like if you're renting a car, or you're getting a service loaner or something like that. If you connect, nothing wrong with connecting your phone via Bluetooth. However, when you turn the vehicle back in, before you turn it in, make sure that you actually go through and clear the settings for your phone. Delete your phone, delete any messages, because, usually when you connect your phone via Bluetooth, your phone will prompt you, do you want to download your contacts? Do you want to download your messages? So that when you use the voice controls, it can find the stuff more quickly, and it can read your messages out to you while you're driving, things like that. If you're, sharing, if you've got a vehicle that you're renting or borrowing, you probably don't want to leave all your personal data in there. So make sure you go through and, delete all that stuff, delete your phone settings, delete all your contacts, any messages that might be on there. And, it's worth it to spend a couple of minutes to do that, so that whoever has that vehicle next, doesn't have your address book and all your SMS messages in there in the car. But because of the way that Lexus interface is set up, it made it more confusing. So it made it seem like, hooking up an iPhone was the only option, when in fact that was actually the remnants of another user's iPhone settings being there.
And I know these guys are super busy, but I will say that it would be nice if the car is delivered with like factory default with nothing connected, kind of like how you're going to get it at the dealership as a new car. Everything's deleted out and you're kind of starting fresh, because it was so frustrating for me, especially because I had been traveling all day. I needed to make some important phone calls and I couldn't do it. I certainly couldn't do it safely, and I'll talk about this car more completely next week, but as I'm driving it, it's been fine, but that was just a really, the initial frustration for me. The other thing it does is that I get text messages, but I have no way of reading them. So it lets me know that I've gotten a new text message, and then all of a sudden the pressure is there to, so I actually end up pulling over the other day to, again, there's, things that are important, things that are going on that I need to read these fairly promptly. So I end up pulling over, sitting on the side of the road and reading through these. So I haven't had an intuitive, I think this is the main thing, is it has not been intuitive for me to be in this vehicle. So, it's one of those things that it's something that as an industry, we continue to develop, but something that I heard on the Palisade Drive as well is that I think it's in next year, the forecast is that Gen X will actually be the majority of new car buyers for the first time, bumping out the baby boomers. And it's not millennials that will be the majority. It's actually Gen X. And, I kind of joke around, if you need technology broken, I am your girl. But I also feel like I'm a fairly early adopter on a lot of things, and I want the latest things, but I also need it to be quite intuitive. And, and again, having a setting of phone, and that's not where you connect your phone, just pisses me off.
Yeah. And, this is an issue that, most manufacturers, have a problem with, is the user experience design. You can put the functions in there, but it has to be implemented in a way that it's easy for people to find and understand, hopefully without looking through the manual. I always try, the first thing when I get into a new vehicle is I try to do all this stuff without looking at the manual, and for the most part, I managed to succeed. But I also know that I have more technical experience than a lot of people, and I kind of see things in a little bit different way from most people. But if you have to go, call up somebody, call up a geek to find out how to pair your phone, you've done it wrong.
Or send a Slack message to your podcast members.
Exactly. And some manufacturers have really started doing this right. Honda and Mercedes, for example, and I think some other manufacturers have started embedding a little NFC tag in the dashboard of the car, so that you don't have to go searching through the menu. If you've got a phone that's got NFC in it, you just and if you're using Apple Pay or Google Pay on your phone, you've got NFC. You just tap your phone on that little NFC logo on the dashboard, and it will automatically pair your phone to Bluetooth.
Yes, and that's amazing.
It goes directly in there. It'll pop up and say, "Do you want to pair this phone?" You hit yes, boom, you're done. And also, if you're using Android Auto, it will also do the same thing as soon as you plug in your phone. If Android Auto is enabled in that car, it will pop up and say, just ask you to confirm that you want to pair this phone, with Android Auto to the car. And you don't and it does all the Bluetooth setup and everything else. You don't have to deal with all of that. So that makes it a lot easier. It does. And speaking of, confusion, with these functions, IHS, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, just released a study. They did a survey of consumers, and they found that for driver assist systems, they're a large proportion of the population does not understand the limits of driver, especially level 2 driver assist systems like Autopilot and Super Cruise and Volvo Pilot Assist and these various other systems. And again, part of this, I think, we referenced it earlier, when we were talking about hill descent control, is the branding. Every manufacturer has their own branding for these functions, and some of them, by the name, like Autopilot, Tesla Autopilot, for example, imply certain capabilities. Because most people are not pilots. They've never actually used an autopilot feature in an aircraft. And when you hear the name Autopilot, what does that imply to you?
Right. Well, because we've all seen that pilots that's when they get the opportunity to take a break, and the plane is flying itself. And you can go to the bathroom. Like, that's when the pilot that's my impression of it. Yeah. But yeah, it implies that you don't have to, that you are not 100% engaged with the vehicle.
Right. And for aircraft, especially commercial aircraft using Autopilot, Autopilot is not an autonomous flying system. It's not something where you put in a destination and hit go and it just automatically flies you there. Basically, what Autopilot is basically cruise control. It keeps the plane going at the same altitude and same heading and the same speed, that you set it at. So if you're heading west at 500 miles an hour at 35,000 feet, that's where it's going to keep you. That's all Autopilot does on most aircraft. It's not trying to evade other traffic. When radar picks up something that may be in your way, it's going to alert the pilot, and the pilot has to take over and fly around that and make any corrections or changes in course.
Right.
In fact, the Autopilot capability that Tesla has in their vehicles is in some ways more advanced than what actual Autopilot systems in aircraft does. And similarly with GM's Super Cruise and these other systems, but they all have limitations, and unfortunately, I think manufacturers don't do a very good job of really, they're so intent on trying to sell the technology that they don't really do a very good job of explaining what it can't do, but more importantly, what it cannot do. And that's where you start to get into trouble, and you see videos online of people sleeping in their Teslas while they're on autopilot. And, it's not, it may be fine in certain situations, it might be able to handle that. But, there's a lot of scenarios, most scenarios that it cannot handle. And, the same applies to all these other systems. And manufacturers, just as with their infotainment systems, they need to do a better job when you buy a car of educating the consumer of, how to use these systems, what they can do, what they can't do, and making sure that you understand all that stuff before you drive off the lot.
Right. Well, and also just, I did an interview recently talking about how to do a test drive, and then I actually went with my sister, who bought a new to her car. Basically, it will eventually be her husband's station car, but she bought a 2015 Jeep Grand Cherokee, and test driving. We drove a couple of different brand new cars also, so she could get a feel for some of this technology and what it does. And, I have to encourage people to, when you're on these test drives in this new modern world, that you've got to try out these systems and don't just go the route that the dealer suggests. You're generally in your home, in your neighborhood, or at least, local to, and try out different roads and try these things. What does it feel like to have lane keep assist kick in? And, what does it feel like to have the lane departure warning, whether it's a haptic feedback and your seat starts vibrating, or all the buttons, or the sound starts going off and there's a lot of beeping going on in your car, whatever that may be. Try out those kinds of things. Try them out. Try out the blind spot monitoring. What does that look like? Is there a sound that goes with it, or is it just passive and just the lights go on in the mirrors? But all those sorts of things have to be accounted for in a test drive. The other interesting thing, and I will say that my sister's husband is, he's very frugal with his money, which means they're going to have a fantastic retirement. But he didn't value a lot of those technologies. And now, granted, again, he's basically going to go from his house to the train station and back, but the times that they do have it on the highway or on some of these roads, he just didn't see the value in it. He didn't understand why you would want to pay for that. And so I think it's important and incumbent upon both the dealers and the manufacturers to talk to the consumer and explain why these things are valuable, explain how these things, yes, you're paying more for them, but the reason that you're paying for them and the safety part of it. A lot of it, too, is interesting because it implies, like some of the, especially like lane keep assist, it implies that you somehow are not able to stay in your lane, which implies that you're a bad driver. And so there was some discussion also about, this isn't about your driving skills. This is about the reality of our world today, where you can be distracted. However diligent you are with your phone, it can be a distraction. And when we talk about interacting with technology, you hate touchscreens. I love touchscreens. The knobs, again, like how we each interact with that. The difference between how my nephew, who loved the Lexus interface, and I came away not loving it. All those things come into play when we're driving and when we're interacting with our vehicle. It's just not as simple as it used to be anymore. And we've got to start to get used to that, especially, if you're coming out of a 10-year-old car and you haven't seen these things at all. They're all new.
And, when we talk about distractions, it's not just about, messing around with your phone or something like, or texting, things like that while you're driving. There's all kinds of distractions that you can have. If you've got kids in the car, you're going to have distractions, unless they're fast asleep in the back seat. That's just the way it is. And, if you hear a siren, for a police car, or an ambulance or a fire truck, you're going to be looking around trying to figure out where it's coming from. That's a distraction that could also lead to the same kind of accident, that you might have, if you're texting. And, there's, other things that, there's all kinds of things that happen on the road, kid's ball rolls out in front of you, cyclist, suddenly veers in front of you, there's lots of things. So you do need to pay attention. You need to understand the technology that's in there and understand what you can rely on and what you should not rely on.
Exactly. That ball rolling is a real thing. I mean, I had that experience. Actually, I was test driving a Mercedes E-Class AMG over in Germany, and a ball came running out, and I slammed on my brakes, and the guy's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well." And a second later, a little kid came running out into the street. And he's like, "How did you know that was going to happen?" I was like, "Because behind a rolling ball comes a running child." And, and these are the kinds of things that if you are not paying attention, as you say, Sam, if you're distracted by your kids, by a pet, and whatever it may be, there's all sorts of things that are going on in the vehicle that can pull you away. And so these systems are really just designed, we have them now. Take advantage of them, learn how to use them, learn how you interact with them. And I can't stress enough, on the Hyundai Palisade, they do offer Hyundai Sense, the driving safety features that comes standard. You do have to upgrade a bit to get all of the full packaging, but I just encourage people, as you look for new vehicles, to check those boxes on the safety part of it first.
Absolutely. All right, so let's hit one more thing that just came up last night as we're recording this morning, and that's the new BMW had an event in Munich where they unveiled the Vision M Next, which is a concept mid-engine supercar. What do you think of this one?
So, I like this. I mean, I don't think I've driven the i8 ever. I just had the i3, which we went into in gory detail, and I'll leave that behind. But what I want to see from this vehicle, and certainly from the design of it, it looks like it, I want BMW to come out with the ultimate driving machine that just so happens to be electric. This is a hybrid, and so it's a plug-in hybrid. It's got a turbo four-cylinder engine that's gas powered, probably diesel in some other parts. I don't know, but right now they just reference the gas.
Yeah, I think it'll
gasoline engine.
I'm guessing there will never be a diesel in this one. It'll probably be gas only.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm thinking of old school. Yeah. So this is a gasoline engine. So it's not fully electric. It says it has a combined output of 600 horsepower, 0 to 62 in 3 seconds. It goes 186 miles an hour. I want them to make this vehicle so that it is still the ultimate driving machine. So this one has 62 miles of electric only on a full charge. The i8 only has 18, and that certainly is very appealing. But again, we're getting into this sort of weird, will consumers see the value in a hybrid, in this plug-in hybrid where you're plugging it in and you're getting 62 miles of range? What does that really do for people in their minds? I think that we all know you can go to it from work for the most part, even a couple of times in the week without having to charge it and do it on electric. But I think it's super cool looking. But I liked the i8. I thought that was really cool looking too. And so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what this technology, how appealing this is for people. But I'm glad that it looks really cool. It is all about the M, the M, and it will maintain that M feel to it. But we'll have to see how it performs in the market.
Yeah, we're probably not going to see this one, in production form until about 2022 or 23. One of the things that was talked about at this event last night is that BMW is going to start next year deploying a technology that geofences the electric operation. So, with a plug-in hybrid like this, one of the advantages to it is you don't have the range, and charging limitations of a full battery electric vehicle. But you also, you have the ability to run on electricity only. And especially in Europe and some other places where, we're starting to see cities, talking about banning internal combustion engine vehicles from city centers. One of the advantages to, a plug-in hybrid like this is, if you're going into a city center, you can put it, program in the destination into the nav, or tell the vehicle where you're going, and it can actually conserve the charge in the battery until you get into that city center area, and then switch over to running on battery only. So, on the highway, you could be driving, in a hybrid mode with both the engine and electric motors operating. And as you approach the city center, it can automatically switch. When it gets into the zone that's supposed to be electric only, it can automatically switch to that. And in some places, like for example London, where they have a congestion charge, and they have had for many years, if you're operating in electric mode, electric only mode, electric vehicles are not, zero emission vehicles are not subject to the congestion charge. So you get the congestion charge is waived for those vehicles. So, as you enter the congestion zone in London, it can automatically switch over to electric power and shut off the engine. And, that makes it a lot easier. And I think this is one of the things that manufacturers are looking to do is, because like with a lot of other technologies, I think average consumers, haven't really been educated very well. They, frankly, most people aren't like me. They don't have the time to learn about all the technologies and what they do and how they work, and frankly don't care. They just want it. They just want it to work. They don't care about all those niggling little details like I do. So, to have something like that in there that knows where the vehicle is, knows where the zero emission zone is, and automatically switches over when you get there without you having to go in and switch modes all the time, I think is a really good thing. It will make it a lot more useful to people to have that kind of capability.
Right. No, I think that's fantastic. And it's another good example of where we're getting vehicles that interact better with the world around them. And they're smart. They're smart, literally, like they know where they are and what the condition is, and they can automatically adapt to it. And those congestion chargers are becoming more and more popular. There's discussions here in New York about having those kinds of zones. Now, it doesn't really solve the problem of just how many people are on the road, because, I was talking recently to some people about the HOV lane out in California, and where there's no plan for like grandfathering out vehicles, and now they're just as crowded as any other lane. But as you say, those congestion charges, if you can then switch it over and be able to still use your vehicle in these locations in a way that's largely transparent to you, then that I think is a huge benefit. And it not only keeps the congestion charges, but it does keep a cleaner world around us too, and be able to utilize that. So, I know it's a few years away, but I do think that this is a really, really cool technology, and that's a really, really nice advancement that they've made in terms of making this vehicle more usable and user-friendly on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I think, from a design standpoint, as you alluded to earlier, this one goes a little bit different direction from the i8, which I have been lucky enough to drive. It's a fantastic vehicle, but this one, from a design perspective, actually kind of veers back more towards the original M1 of 1978. It's a little bit less spaceship than the i8, and a little bit more of the M1, which I think overall works really well. It's got some interesting details on it, like the coloring, these blocks of color on the body, various panels. Yeah.
Right.
And, I don't know if that'll make it to production, but it's, for a concept, it's certainly interesting.
Well, and the other thing too is that this is very driver focused. This is a very driver focused vehicle, as opposed to the M Next, which I saw back in I don't know, when was that? Like
September, I think.
Last September. They had it here at JFK, and we got to experiencing it. That is more of a pod feel, where even the fabric, you could interact with the fabric. So you press the fabric, and and lights show up, or a screen will show up. Like the fabric is interactive as well, and that was more about that level 5 pod sort of feel to it. This is much more driver centric, which is kind of cool to have those two contrasts in experience, because if you think about, if this vehicle, as you say, it can interact with the congestion zone, then this is about getting somebody into work or getting you into the city. The M Next was more about the whole car experience and having everybody have an experience within the cabin. So I like their philosophy. I like that they're coming out at it with multiple angles, and it's really what you expect to see from some of these manufacturers, something that's really forward thinking, but still in line with their overall corporate philosophy.
Yeah, one of the interesting design details in the interior of this vehicle is the instrument cluster, or the boost pod as they call it, which is not a traditional instrument cluster at all. But behind the rectangular steering wheel, there's actually a couple of transparent panels, transparent LCD panels, and depending on the mode you're on, the instruments and whatever information you're providing the driver appears on these transparent panels that you can see directly through, that sit above and behind the steering wheel. And if you've ever watched the show, the sci-fi show, The Expanse, this is a show that's set about 300 years in the future. The phones that they use in there are similar design. They're transparent. They look like just a sheet of glass with a strip at the bottom where a battery would be. And when it's off, it just looks like a clear piece of glass that you can just look right through. And then when it turns on, you see the display on there. So instead of being display on a black background, it's a transparent background, and that's what they've done for the instrument cluster in this thing, and it's quite interesting to look at.
That is really cool, and of course, there's also the gyroscopic cup holder.
Yeah, well, you absolutely need that in a car
that you're
going to be driving swiftly. You want to keep your coffee level, or actually
yes,
you want it to lean into the curve so that it's not spilling over.
Right.
It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen there's a film of, I think his name was Tex Johnson. He was a Boeing test pilot in the 1950s. He was doing a demonstration flight, or maybe it was Bob Hoover. It's Bob Hoover. He was a.
Oh, I like the Tex Johnson name better.
Bob
for a test
Hoover,
pilot.
Was a World War II pilot, and he did aerobatics, up and for decades up until his death a few years ago. There's a video of him flying a Beechcraft, and he's doing a barrel roll in this thing, and as he's doing a barrel roll, he picks up a pitcher of iced tea and he's pouring iced tea into the cup, and he's doing the barrel roll at just the right rate, so that he was maintaining exactly 1 G. So even though the plane was rolling over, he was able to pour the iced tea into the glass from a pitcher.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
And that's what this gyroscopic cup holder is doing, essentially, is leaning into the curve so your stuff doesn't spill.
Oh my gosh. I love it. Hey, I have to just say one thing. Speaking of great test drivers, if you haven't had the opportunity to see the movie Hurley, I watched it on my flight back from California on Delta. It's really good. It's about Hurley Haywood, who is a longtime professional race car driver for Porsche. And have you driven with him before?
I have never driven with him or met Mr. Haywood, but I did buy the movie and download it. I just haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
Yeah, so he actually was one of the first. I got the chance to have him as my instructor on multiple Porsche events, and I think he liked the fact that, first of all, I was usually the only female, and he liked the fact that I actually listened to him in instructions. But he taught me how to
actually listen.
I know, right? So he taught me how to do launch control in the 911, and we've been on multiple tracks, and I just adore him. And he's just a lovely, lovely gentleman. But it's a really good story about his career, about him coming out for the first time. We get to meet his husband, and it's just it's a lovely story about how racing has and has not evolved and diversified, but the whole storyline is really cool, and he's just a gentleman, and so I would encourage anybody who has the chance to watch it, who likes racing. You get some great insights into the 70s and 80s racing and culture and such. So I think I definitely related to it because I know him, and he's just always lovely, and it's just a really cool movie. I thought to watch it on. So if you get a chance to see it, I would encourage people to do that.
Yep, I'm looking forward to watching it. And I'm also looking forward to seeing you again later this week at the Fiat Chrysler Proving Grounds for their annual What's New event, where we'll be recording another live, hopefully in a vehicle podcast later this week.
Yes, exactly. So that will be fun. That's on Thursday.
All right. And with that, let's think we've been chattering on long enough for today. Let's call this one a show, and thank everybody for listening. And please, if you like what you hear, share it with your friends. Post it online. Let people know we exist, and let's help grow the audience. And until next time, bye.
Bye.